Hi guys, welcome back to the greenhouse. This is Kate with Wallace's Garden Center in Bettendorf, and today we are going to talk fertilizers. Anyone that's done any gardening at all knows that fertilizer is important, but that might be all you know. And when you come into the garden center and look around, there are so many kinds to choose from. There's different brands. There's some that are granular, some that you mix with water. There are some that are organic, there are some that are synthetic. It can be a little bit overwhelming trying to figure out what fertilizer you need for your specific purpose. I'm going to talk about fertilizer today and teach you some of the general basics. And then that way, next time you come into Wallace's, you can kind of sort through what you're looking for on your own. And we are always happy to answer your questions as well. We all have our favorites, but there are a lot of different fertilizers, and we want to help you make sure you're using the right one to get the best success with your plants. Even though there are lots of different types, there's one thing that all fertilizers have in common. And that main thing is that whenever you look at a fertilizer, you will see these three little numbers. Usually they're on the front somewhere, sometimes they're on the back or the side, but you will find them on all different types of fertilizer. And what they are is it tells you about the three main nutrients that are in that particular formulation. So the first number is always nitrogen, N. And the nitrogen is responsible for green leafy growth, leaves, and stems. The middle number is going to be your phosphorus content. So phosphorus is what we use, the plant uses for blooming, rooting, fruit production, and just kind of all those important processes in the life of a plant. The last number is the potassium content. Potassium is kind of an all-around nutrient for plants. It's responsible for the overall health of the plant. The potassium helps the cells build stronger cells, stronger plant tissues. So it makes the plant more resistant to diseases, more resistant to drought, makes them more tolerant to heat. All three numbers very important. The easiest way to remember them is up, down, and all around. So like I said before, your first number is leaves and stems. Your middle number is roots and fruits, and then your last number is going to be the potassium for all over plant health. This is a really good example of 10-10-10. That's kind of a basic fertilizer that's good for most things in outdoor and indoor gardening. Sometimes those numbers vary, they'll be different. So in this houseplant fertilizer, we have a 15-30-15. The thing to know about the numbers when they change is that they are a ratio. And the number indicates the percent of that nutrient by weight. I don't want to give a chemistry or a math class right now, but basically on the 10-10-10, 10% of the weight of this bag, so if it's a 4-pound bag, 10% of that is going to be nitrogen, 10% is going to be phosphorus, and 10% is going to be potassium. That does leave about 70%. That is something else. What that is usually what we call the carrier or an inert ingredient, and it's just something that helps make the fertilizer easier to spread, easier to apply to your plants. So now that you know those three numbers, you can decide what you're looking for. Most of our lawn fertilizers are going to be higher in the nitrogen content because we want that green growth of the growing stems. When you're doing flowers in containers, a lot of your blooming formulations will have that high middle number, high phosphorus, to promote blooming and rooting. And then they will all have potassium for that all over plant health. Now the biggest question that we get all the time is, do I need an organic fertilizer or a synthetic fertilizer? They both have their ups, they both have their downs. The great thing about them is that the plant can't tell the difference. It is getting food and nutrients that it needs to grow and do cell division and metabolize. And so the plant can't tell the difference. So I'm going to go over some of the benefits of each one. I'm going to start with some of our organic fertilizers. So Espoma is one of our strong brands that does organic fertilizer. And that basically means that this is just derived from plant material, animal byproducts, minerals in nature. It's not made in a lab or in a factory. So organic fertilizer tends to have lower concentrations of the nutrients, and this is a good example of what one of the granulars looks like. I like to use these organic granules on my outdoor plants out in the garden, especially my established plants, not anything I've just planted, but I'm going to use this on my shrubs that are already in the ground. This is what it looks like when it comes out of the bag. And one thing I always say about organic fertilizer is that you can always smell that it's organic, because there are sometimes manure products in there as well. So you may have this out in your yard and have a pet or a child go to it, especially your pets, because they like the way it smells. But it's organic, so it's not going to hurt them. And it's something you definitely don't have to worry about. Organic fertilizers work a little different. Because they go into the soil, they actually have to be broken down by the microorganisms in the soil. So I like to say that the organic fertilizers actually feed the soil so the soil can feed the plants. These are going to be broken down over time. And so they are more what we call slow release or slower acting. This is something you kind of want to do on a regular basis. It's not something that we're going to use in a rescue situation where we have, petunias that are turning yellow and they need to green up quickly before an event at our home. So organic fertilizer is what we're going to use to continually build our soil. Usually every spring, every fall, we're going to use these organic granules outdoors. If you want to use organic fertilizer indoors, Espoma also makes a series of liquids that you're going to mix with water. And they are formulated especially for your houseplants, your cacti, your succulents, your orchids. So there's definitely an organic option for indoors and outdoors. So once you've decided that you want to use an outdoor organic granular fertilizer, how do you choose which one? Well, Espoma has made it very easy. They have a lot of different, as I like to call them, flavors. 10-10-10 is a really basic garden food. It's nice and balanced. If you have healthy plants that are established, this is a great maintenance fertilizer to do twice per year. They also have some formulations. This is Hollytone. This is our #1 seller. Hollytone is formulated more for evergreens. So anything in the evergreen family, pines, spruces, rhododendrons, azaleas, Hollytone is where you're gonna want to go. They also make a citrus tone, a rose tone, a flower tone. So depending on where you're putting it in the garden, you can choose that fertilizer. That all being said, I tend to use Hollytone on almost everything in my garden, whether it's a flowering shrub, my knockout roses, or my boxwood. I usually just get one big bag of Hollytone and take it home and use it on everything. So with the organic fertilizers, because they are slower acting and they're going to break down in the soil, I always recommend an application in the spring and usually again in the fall. And that's when our soil is warming up and our soil is still warm going into winter. That's when your soil microbes are going to be very active. They're going to break down this fertilizer, and as the plants are growing in the spring or getting ready for bed in the fall, they're going to be taking up the nutrients that the microorganisms are creating from the organic fertilizer. But that being said, a lot of our plants that we grow throughout the summer, the flowers in our greenhouse, we're mostly taking hanging baskets home. We're planting beautiful containers. We've got tomatoes in the garden, and a healthy soil is a great building block, but we also need to fertilize more often. And that is where there's definitely a place for synthetic fertilizer. So like I said before, plants cannot tell the difference. So the most common that you're going to see is what we call a water-soluble fertilizer. These are sold as blue powders. And you can kind of see that's that. So the most common one that you'll ever see is Miracle Gro. It's kind of been around for a long time. Here in the greenhouse, we use Jack's fertilizer. Jack's is an awesome greenhouse company. They've been around for a long time. They make professional fertilizers for us, for a lot of greenhouse growers in our business. And then they also have this line for the homeowners. And they will always tell you on the back the directions of how to mix it. So we're going to mix this with water. I usually use it in a watering can. You can also get a hose end garden feeder if you want to water a lot of things or out in the landscape. They usually come with a little scoop in the bottom of the jar, and that is a measuring scoop, so it can tell you how much you need to use. So for most of our things, it's going to tell us to use an outdoor amount. So for that, it's going to be 1 tablespoon in a gallon of water. So I typically use a 2-gallon watering can, so I fill up 2 tablespoons, put that in the bottom of my can, and then use the hose to fill it. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when we put it in the water. It will dissolve, over time. To help it dissolve, usually the act of putting the hose water in there kind of agitates the water and gets that fertilizer starting to mix in. So we're going to do 2 scoops into, if we had a 2-gallon watering can, it would be 2 scoops. And then we're going to use typically a hose to fill up our watering can or our container. And it won't be this dark blue once you get it diluted to the right amount, but I just wanted to show you there. And if you can still see some of that sediment on the bottom, you want to go ahead, use a tool in your garage to give it a little stir and get that fertilizer dissolved. What that does is it evens out the concentration of the nutrients throughout the entire water column so that the plant that you water first with the watering can gets the same amount of fertilizer as the plants that you're watering last. At home, you're going to want to do a water-soluble fertilizer on your outdoor flowers and your outdoor vegetables, especially if they're in containers. We recommend weekly as you get into the summer. You can go every 2 weeks in the early spring when you're not watering as often. When the temperatures get warmer and we're watering almost every day, this fertilizer does get leached out. The good thing about water-soluble fertilizer is because we are putting it into a liquid solution, it is much easier for the roots to take it up. So it's much more readily available to the plant. And when we get into those rescue situations where something's turning yellow on us or our tomatoes aren't flowering, we can do a nice quick nutrient boost, get them fertilized and get them growing, keep them green and flowering all season long. So water-soluble fertilizer, great for that. There are different formulations in this as well. So I just mixed up the Jack's Bloom Booster. This has that high middle number, which means it's going to promote blooming and rooting and fruiting. So if I'm doing tomatoes, this is a great product, as well as for my petunia hanging baskets. I do a lot of dragonwing begonias. This is great for those. They also make an all-purpose, which is balanced with even numbers all the way across. They have a houseplant formulation as well, which is a 15-30-15. When you read the label, like for the Bloom Booster, the Blossom Booster, it has a measurement for outdoor plants of 1 tablespoon per gallon. It also has a measurement for indoor plants. Typically when we're going to do something indoor where we're not watering as often, we're going to dilute the fertilizer even more than recommended. So it's usually a rate about half as strong as you would be using for outdoor plants. So that is water-soluble fertilizer. Jack's and Miracle Gro are going to be your 2 most common products for that. So I like to have all of these different types of products in my garden because you're using each one in a different way. All right, the last type of fertilizer I want to talk with you about today is the coated or pelleted fertilizer. The most common one you've probably heard of is going to be Osmocote. And the way these pellets work is that they're all 3 of the main nutrients, the NPK, are coated in a little pellet that you see here. And they enter the soil through osmosis. So as you mix this in the soil and the soil gets wet from you watering or raining, a little bit of that nutrient kind of washes into the soil through this pelleted coating. And then it works over time. So this is a great product if you're one that forgets to fertilize, if it's something that you're just really busy and you want your plants to be okay, but you don't have time to do a weekly feeding with a water soluble. These type of fertilizers I always mix into my containers as I'm planting. So when I get my container out in the spring, I fill it with container mix. I add the Osmocote to the soil, mix it in a little bit, plant my plants. I'll usually top dress with a little bit more of it, and it's going to last for 2 months. So this is going to give us a lot of nice, steady, slow release feeding. So don't have to remember to do it quite as often, but it is kind of that nice little insurance policy to mix into all your containers. You can also use this in the garden. We mix Osmocote into a lot of our shrub and perennial soils so that when you go home and plant it, even if you're not fertilizing, there is still a little bit of this left in the soil. So this is a great product to use in tandem with some of the other fertilizers. So all of them have a place in your garage, in your garden shed, and they're definitely all something that you want to use for your plants. When it comes to indoor plants, there is a right time and kind of a wrong time to fertilize them. So all fertilizers work best when the plants are actively growing and metabolizing. Up here in the Midwest, where we are growing a lot indoors all winter long, our plants aren't really growing. They're just kind of maintaining. They go a little bit dormant, so we usually don't recommend repotting them unless absolutely necessary until we start having longer days again. So early to mid-February into March is a great time to start repotting, and also the time you should start up your fertilizing again. Most houseplants prefer fertilizing not as often as your other plants, so maybe once a month, and you're going to use this as they recommend. So if you're using one of your outdoor fertilizers, make sure that you go ahead and dilute it so it's not as strong, or use something specially formulated for an indoor plant. I like to use this Grow concentrate from We the Wild. This is an organic. I mix it in my watering can, and I do this with my plants about once a week. One trick I try to do with all my plants, whether I'm indoors or outdoors, is I set aside one day that is the day that I always fertilize. Then I'm not having to wonder, oh, when was the last time I did that? Have I done it in a while? I typically always set aside Sunday, and Sundays, you know, for some people it's church day. For me at my house, it's fertilizer day. So that's the day that I'm fertilizing my containers. And then usually the first Sunday of the month is when I try to fertilize my indoor plants. So try to hold off on the fertilizer, typically October, November through the middle of February. The plants don't need it then, they're not metabolizing it. Go ahead and get started late winter, early spring. Your houseplants will start to wake up as we have longer days and more sun. In summary, we've talked about a lot of different types of fertilizers. So ideally, this is how you're going to use all of the different products. So outdoors in the garden, about twice a year, every spring and fall, is when we're going to do our organic granular. We're not going to use this indoor, and typically not in our containers. This can also be used in raised beds too. If you're doing raised bed gardening, these outdoor granules are great for that. In our container gardening, on a weekly basis, we're going to do the water-soluble fertilizers. So you can do the Blossom Booster. They also make an awesome petunia fertilizer. They also make a tomato-specific one if you're growing tomatoes and vegetables. But that's going to be a weekly application. Again, pick a day so that you're not trying to remember when your last day was. And then your slow release coated fertilizers. These you're going to do kind of that once a year, right at your planting your containers, and then try to remember to do it again after 2 months. If you're doing the water soluble, it's okay to not reapply this, but I like to do it every 2 months. So outdoors twice a year, every week on your outdoor containers, once a month on your indoor containers for water soluble, and then at planting and as needed on your outdoor containers for the Osmocote. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of the confusion on fertilizer. Our staff is always happy to help answer your questions. Just know that your plants are going to be more successful when they have these nutrients to help build their cell tissue, make them stronger, make them bloom more, fruit more, and make you successful with the most beautiful garden you can have. Thanks for joining me in the greenhouse. Thank you for watching this video and joining me today. Come into Wallace's. We can answer all your fertilizer questions and all your garden questions. Come see us for everything for your home and garden.